What the fuck is up, everyone? Prison Meddler here, back with another reviewing and rating every album series. And today I'm reviewing Disturbed, every album. So, you know how this goes: 0 out of 5 being the worst, and 5 out of 5 being the best. As all may know, I'm not reviewing EPs, compilation, demos, or live albums, just the studio albums only. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and begin. Alrighty, now starting up with is their debut album, The Sickness, released March 7th, 2000, with 4 singles. Stupefy, released April 12th. Down with the Sickness, released October 31st. Voices, released November 21st. And The Game, released February 20th, 2001. And as you may know, of course, this is their studio album. It's a new metal classic with tons of great songs such as Voices, The Game, Stupefy, Down with the Sickness, and pretty much the songs after that are pretty much underrated too. Now, is it one of my favorite new metal debuts? Probably not. I don't know. But I wouldn't say it's as good as like Slipknot self-titled or Korn self-titled, and I definitely don't think it's nowhere near as like one of the greatest new metals of all time, like Slipknot's Iowa or Deftones' White Pony. But it's a really great album. I do like David Draiman's like vocals with a type sound. Sorry, I know it sounds cringe if I do that, but it's whatever. But yeah, I definitely think it's a pretty great album at all for the most part. So yeah, I'm feeling this album. I know it's kind of a short. I don't want to go to the further details, but I do like pretty much almost all songs in this album. Kind of pretty much in my top 3 favorite Disturbed albums. So, as you may know, I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5. I definitely think it's a pretty great album. Maybe not be my favorite Disturbed album, but I do think it's great on the most part. I mean, I do love the song Want, Conflict, and Numb. I do find these songs very underrated. Dropping plays with mainly David Draiman pretty much rapping on the most part. Since he barely rapped in Disturbed, and I think it's his only one with him rapping. So yeah, I definitely think it's a pretty great album. May not be a strong 4 out of 5. It's more like a 4 out of 5, leaning down towards a 3.5. So yeah, I do think it's a really pretty great album on the most part. So yeah, pretty great album. That's all I have to say here. Alrighty, next up we got is Believe, released September 17, 2002, with 3 singles. Prayer, released August 14th. Remember, released December 3rd. And Liberate, released February 18, 2003. As you may know, this album pretty much turned into a more radio rock type album. I mean, it's the same producer as their first album, and it's kind of more like a butt rock approach type albums, but it sounds pretty solid at the most part. I wouldn't say this album is special or anything, but there's plenty of songs that do stand out, such as the song Prayer, which is mainly towards about the, as you may know, it follows up with 9/11, the September 11 terrorist attacks that happened a year before this album was released, and it's mainly about the death of Draiman's grandfather, who was Jewish, his estranged grandfather at the time. It deals with pretty other topics as well, such as Remember, which delivers in the cutthroat nature of the music industry. Yeah, and mainly about the song Bounty and Intoxications mainly focus on Dave Draymond's romantic relationships and all that. But other than that, let's talk about the songs. Prayer is definitely one of the most standout tracks. Liberate's cool. No, it's not a cover from Slipknot's Liberate. It's a complete different song, just so you know. Waken is alright. Believe is I actually do like Believe. I do think it's a pretty great song. Remember's cool. And Intoxication's solid. I do like the song Rise. I do like that one. Breathe is cool, and that's pretty much it. So yeah, it's more like it's kind of like it's one of those albums that's like radio rock. I don't think this album is nowhere near as strong as The Sickness. And out of the classic albums from Disturbed, I would say this is probably my least favorite out of the 2000s era of Disturbed. Out of all 4 albums, I would say this is my least favorite. I mean, it's not a bad album. Don't get me wrong. I do like plenty of songs from it, like I mentioned before. But other than that, I do think it's a pretty okay album at most parts. So I'm going to give this a 2.5 out of 5. It's a pretty strong 2.5 out of 5. Kind of leaning towards a 3. But this album is pretty much enjoyable at most part. I wouldn't say it's like a piss poor album or anything like that. It's one of those albums that you play in the background, as I would consider it. So, yeah. I mean, it's not a bad album, though. Don't get me wrong. It's just, I just think there's way better albums than this. And I just think there's better choice to listen to than this album. I mean, I'm not dissing it or anything. I don't regret listening to this album by any means. I just think it's an alright album, but I just think there's way better albums to listen to than this. That's all. Alrighty. Next up, we got is 10,000 Fist, released September 20th, 2005, with 5 singles. Guarded, released June 28th. Stricken, released July 25th. Just Stop, released February 7th, 2006. Land of Confusion, released October 2nd, 2006. And 10,000 Fists, released December 28, 2006. Now, I think I did, if you've seen my album rankings on them a few years back, I think I did say at one point this was their best album, but nowadays, not so much. But I'll say this, vocally, I think this is David Draymond's best vocal album to date. I think it's the best album with him singing, but not, I don't think this is Disturbed's best album in general. Vocally, it's David Draymond's best album with them, as him as his vocally. Because there's a few songs that I honestly kind of find are filler. I mean, the album has 14 tracks. There's no interludes or any of that. It's all songs. And the album is 56 minutes. It's almost an hour. But with this album, I mean, it's pretty good on the most part. It had a little bit of filler, but it's pretty good. 10,000 Fists, I do like. Definitely a great way. I do like Just Stop. Guarded's great. Defy, Stricken. I do like the song Sons of Plunder. That's pretty much underrated. Overburden is probably one of the best vocals from David Draymond as clean vocalist. He was phenomenal in that song. I'll say that. Dissidence is good. Forgiven. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I never cared for their Genesis cover, Land of Confusion. It kind of sounds like how am I going to say that? It sounds like the same as the original song, but with more distorted guitar. That's how I would say about this. I mean, it's nowhere near as good as the original, but I mean, I just don't care for that cover of a song, to be honest with you. But besides all that, I do think this is a pretty good album for the most part. Avarice is a great way to close the track. It's more of their high tempo type songs, but most of all, I definitely think it's a pretty good album on the most part. Um, I'm going to give this album a 3.5 out of 5. This could have been. It's possible that I would rate this a 4 out of 5 if you probably omit some of the filler songs, such as the Land of Confusion song, the Genesis cover, and maybe another song or two, and it'll be great. But other than that, it's a 3.5 out of 5 on the most part. I mean, 10,000 Fists is definitely their most political album. But I did say it's their best album at one point, but not so much anymore. I mean, I still like it. I still like the album. It's just, I guess I kind of overgrown something, or I don't know. I just don't think it's their best anymore. But it's still pretty good at the most part. So I'm not hating on it, not dissing it. It's just a good album. Alrighty, next up we got is Indestructible, released June 3rd, 2008, with 4 singles. Inside the Fire, released March 25th, 2008. Perfect Insanity, released May 6th. Indestructible, released September 29th. And The Night, released March 31st, 2009. And as let me know, with this album pretty much leaned towards a darker tone lyrically. Especially the song Inside the Fire, which is about David Draymond's girlfriend who committed suicide when he was 16. The lyrics in this album is pretty dark. I know I said this before, this was one of their Disturbed's best albums at the time, but nowadays, not so much anymore. I kind of think The Sickness is better than that album. But lyrically, it's a dark album. The reason why I said that is because I sort of found a hidden gem album from Disturbed, which I will talk about that in a bit. But with this album, the music is pretty basic, to tell you the truth. I kind of find the music, in the most part, basic. But, I mean, production's still great. I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's just a very basic album from Disturbed. Throughout the album is pretty much his bad relationships and the suicide of his girlfriend. And prior to the making of the album, he was in a motorcycle wreck that he was involved in. But, as I know, I do love the song Indestructible. That's a really great song. Inside the Fire is a great one. I do love the song The Night. I do like that song. Perfect Insanity's cool. Haunted's great. Enough is great. Curse is great. Pretty solid. The album itself is decent. The album in general is decent at most part. Again, I just feel like when I look back to it, I just feel like the songwriting is very basic. I mean, I wouldn't say it's forgettable or anything. I wouldn't say it's like a forgettable album or anything. It's just, I think, I just feel like they could add something with the instrumentation and all. That's kind of like my minor criticism of all that. I mean, I wouldn't find a bad thing on this album for the most part. It's just, vocals are still great. I mean, I do like the riffs, don't get me wrong, but I don't really need to repeat myself here. So I'm going to give this album a 3 out of 5 nowadays. I do think it's a pretty decent album overall. I do like its dark themes throughout this album from David Draymond. It definitely pretty much fits well with the album, especially with I do love the album cover. Out of all album covers, this is definitely the best album cover in my opinion, but I kind of find the music itself pretty basic, but it's still a decent album. Okay, now next up we got is Asylum, released August 31st, 2010, with 4 singles released. Another Way to Die, released June 14th. Asylum, released July 19th. The Animal, released October 4th. And Warrior, released March 3rd, 2011. Now, as I speak of hidden gems before on Indestructible, this may be very, very, very controversial statement here. Nowadays, I think Asylum is Disturbed's best album. I'm not gonna lie. I think this is their best album. The lyrics is way darker than Indestructible. The music itself is nowhere near as basic as Indestructible. It actually fits well with the lyrics perfectly, and it has more of a mature themes for the album. It's definitely one of the band's most mature albums. I mean, it has a much more darker sound with it. As you may know, the song Another Way to Die is about global warming. Supreme is a song about eternal and frightening. It's about a demonic woman who uses her sexuality to prey on men. I mean, holy shit, it's a pretty great album. I mean, it's a lot of dark moments. Crucified's about a relationship that David fell apart and its desperation it brings you into. And the B-side track called Old Friend, which is about a main character from the show Dexter. And My Child is about David Draymond impregnating his girlfriend, and he was rating himself mentally for a child as his girlfriend miscarried him and lost the child. And Innocence about a corrupt attorney. And My Sacrifice is about how people seem to have two sides to their personality, a light and a dark side. It's kind of like with Dr. Jekyll and Hyde types. So yeah, it's pretty dark. I mean, let's talk about the music. The music is I'd say the music itself improved. It's nowhere near as basic as Indestructible. I mean, it does have some pretty unusual elements. I do like the guitar work from Dan Donegan. I can't pronounce his name, but the songwriting is improved compared to the previous albums. I mean, I do like the song. I think what's the song? The Animal. The guitar solo kind of has some melodic death metal sounding to it. I mean, it could be the wrong song. I don't know. But yeah, I'm going to say this. This is probably Disturbed's best album to date. I'm not going to lie. This album is pretty much of a hidden gem album. As I may know, the song is like the song Never Again is mainly about the Nazi Holocaust of World War II. As I may know. Yeah, I just think it's a major improved album from Indestructible, so I'm going to give this album a 4 out of 5. I definitely think this is definitely the band's strongest album today. I know it's very controversial. I know some of you may prefer their more popular albums like The Sickness or 10,000 Fists, but to me nowadays, I say Asylum is their best album. I mean, I always loved the song Another Way to Die, to be honest with you, and especially the song Asylum, which is, I have to say, this is their heaviest song. By far their heavier song. I mean, be honest with you. So, yeah. Yeah, I know it's pretty controversial, but I say this is Disturbed's best album. Alrighty, next up we got is Immortalized, released August 21st, 2015, with 4 singles released. The Vengeful One, released June 25th, The Light, released October 5th, Sound of Silence, released December 7th, and Open Your Eyes, released July 19th. As I may know, this is the band's first album since Asylum, released in 2010, which was released 5 years. This came out 5 years after Asylum. And yeah, during that period, the band went on hiatus to focus on other materials. As we know, David Draymond was focusing on his one-time side project called Device, which is more of the industrial version of Disturbed with more electronic sounds. That's how I would say. Dan Donegan and Mike Wergnam has a side project called Fight for Flight, as let me know, which is another side project, which I'm not too familiar with. And David Draymond also produced Trivium's album Vengeance Falls back in 2013, as y'all may know. And then all of a sudden, I think around, from what I read, the band planned on coming back together in 2014. As I may know, they came back and started writing materials for their next album. As I may know, their bass player John Moyer was absent during the making of the album due to his focus on something else. At the time, he was focused on other bands like Adrenaline Mob, Art of Anarchy, and Operation Mindcrime, which is basically Geoff Tate's spin-off after he left from Creed's Right. But as for the album itself, kind of weaker compared to their previous albums. My main problem with this album is I just don't like its production. It just sounds way too overproduced. I mean, I do like the song Immortalized. I do like Vengeful One. I do like the Sound of Silence cover track. But the rest, I just could not care for, to be honest with you. It's very overproduced. And most of the songs in there are just kind of forgettable, to tell you the truth. And it's kind of a letdown compared to their previous albums. I'm not gonna lie, I just never cared for this album that much. Even especially since I listened to this album, I just feel like it's a lot weaker, to tell you the truth. I mean, it did have some solid qualities here and there, but the album itself is just, I just don't find it inspiring and all that. It's just, most of the songs in there are quite forgettable. Even if you listen 100 times, I could barely remember the songs, most of the songs on there. But yeah, as I may know, the song Fire Up is mainly about smoking a bong, which is retarded. I don't know why David Draymond would write a song about that. Especially he'd been writing better shit like fucking Nazi Germany, especially lyrics from Indestructible and Asylum. But this one, kind of, okay, let's make a song about smoking a bong and blah, 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 blah. But, yeah. I'm going to give this album a 2 out of 5. I wouldn't consider this as a bad album. Maybe a little bit, but not, I wouldn't say it's a bad album in general. It's more like I consider this more like a lame album, mediocre type album at the most part. But I'll say this is not Disturbed's worst album yet. We're going to get to that very shortly. So, yeah. This isn't Disturbed's worst album, but we're going to get there pretty soon. Very shortly. Alrighty. Next up we got is Evolution. Released October 19, 2018, with 4 singles released. Are You Ready? Released August 16th. A Reason to Fight. Released September 21st, 2018. No More. Released June 2nd, 2019. And Hold On to Memories. Released January 7th, 2020. Oh boy, where am I going to start with this album? As I mentioned earlier that Immortalized wasn't Disturbed's worst album. Well, guys, we came to their worst album, Evolution. Yes, this is easily Disturbed's worst album. First of all, they pretty much changed their sound with more of their acoustic type ballad type sounds. I'm gonna say this: I don't mind this direction that Disturbed is going in with the acoustic sets. I don't really mind it since Darkness is pretty much of a solid track. That's not the only thing I just don't like this direction. Well, I don't mind it. They did it too much with this album. Not only that I like that, I absolutely hate the production on this album. The production is just horrible. I mean, the fucking drumming sounds more like digital electronic sounding. Synthesizers in the background sounded pretty bad too. And yeah. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I only like one song from this album. And the only song I like from here is Are You Ready? That's it. I don't care for No More. I don't care for A Reason to Fight. I don't care for any songs from here besides Are You Ready? The album is just a massive snooze fest. It's boring. The choruses aren't as catchy. Not even the heavier songs of the album doesn't do a fucking thing for me. It just sounds very soft, and the lyrics is pretty much the same as the previous album, but it just does not fit well with the music at all. I mean, the album pretty much sounds like if Daughtry tried to make a new metal type album. That's what it pretty much sounds like. It sounds more like a fucking Daughtry record to me. But yeah, as for this album, it's bad. I mean, it's really bad. I mean, David Draymond even tried to compare this album to Metallica's Black Album. Like, are you fucking serious? How? What, because of more ballad tracks? I mean, that's not even accurate. I guess you could say Load and Reload, but not Black Album. But yeah, I mean, most of this album, pretty much 95% of this album is just very forgettable. It's boring. It's very formulaic. Nothing new here is from this album. It's just very forgettable. Almost all songs on there is forgettable besides Are You Ready? So yeah, guys, I just think this is a really, really bad album. I'm going to give this a 1.5 out of 5. I mean, throughout this album, it's just a complete filler fest. I mean, the album is produced by Kevin Churko, who's known for producing Five Finger Death Punch albums. And yeah, he also produced their last album too. I mean, yeah, the production of their last album, Immortalized, was bad, but it's nowhere near as bad as this album. Trust me, it's nowhere near as bad as this album. But yeah, guys, yeah, this is a really bad album, and I kind of don't want to talk about this anymore, so I'm going to go ahead and move on. So yeah, that's all I have to say here. I think this is Disturbed's worst album to date. Moving on. Alright, next up we got is Divisive, released November 18th, 2022, with 4 singles. Hey You, released July 14th. Batman, released November 15th. Unstoppable, released April 25th, 2023. Don't Tell Me, released November 7th, 2023. And yeah, I'm sorry, Unstoppable was released September 23rd, 2022. But the official single wasn't released until 2023, but oh well. Now, with this album, my thoughts on this, it is a lot better than Immortalized and Evolution, in my opinion. Much better than their last 2 albums. I mean, it's nowhere near as strong as their Classics album, except maybe for Believe, but it's definitely the band's strongest album in quite a long time. They definitely brought back their heavier roots. The production is much better. Um, it, Much better produced. I mean, great songs. Hey You, Bad Man, Divisive, Unstoppable. It pretty much sounds like old Disturb again. I'm not gonna lie. It pretty much, it's a very solid record. I mean, he still pretty much kept the lyrical themes about, political, about the government and all that, but and there are still like a few like ballad type covers, especially the leads. Don't Tell Me, which features Ann Wilson, who is the lead singer from Heart. Which I'll be honest, I kind of don't care for that track very much. But other than that, I do think this is a pretty decent album. Yes, again, this is a major improvement over the last two albums. I was kind of afraid that if Disturbed continued to go that direction that was from Evolution, I would probably stop caring for it. But with this album, it's a lot more improvement. But I wouldn't say this album is like special or anything. It's definitely nowhere near as good as most of their 2000s material. But the album itself is pretty much strong at the most part. Um, I mean, again, pretty much well produced. So, yeah, I'm gonna give this a 3 out of 5. It's a pretty decent record overall. I mean, very much improved, much better than Evolution, that's for sure. So, yeah, it's definitely enough for me to give this band another chance, since they definitely proved that they have improved a lot since then, and they're still pretty much making pretty solid music to this very day. Alright, guys, so that is my reviewing and rating every Disturbed album. So, yeah, guys, what is yours? Let me know in the comments. And yeah, guys, that's pretty much it for the video. So, I don't know what's the next band I'm doing. So, I might put on a voting poll on my community tabs page. I don't know yet. We'll see. I might have to list some bands on whether I should do first. So, yep. I mean, anyways, guys, that's pretty much it. So I'm going to go ahead and get the fuck out of here. So I'm out.